When I was in high school and a little bit throughout college, I played the trading card game Yu-Gi-Oh! Back then, I played it competitively, and I would compete in local tournaments and even big regional tournaments hosted by Konami. And over time, I found myself slowly losing interest in the game, and eventually fully quitting. As some of you know, I made a video years ago explaining the reasons for quitting Yu-Gi-Oh! And if you want, you can check out that video, because I still stand by everything I said in that video. But that begs the question, why is the title of this video called Why I Started Playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Again? Well, because all of my main issues that I had with Yu-Gi-Oh! Were solved once I discovered a new way to play the game. And ironically, the new way is the old way. That's right, I'm talking about Time Wizard formats, aka retro formats, but more specifically, Edison format. But before I talk about this, let me give you a quick summary of my issues with the modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Game first, just to better explain to people who haven't played before or in a while. Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2023 is overcomplicated, overpriced, and constantly power crept with outrageous new cards and mechanics introduced every couple of months. Decks that you spent hundreds of dollars on can lose value overnight with ban lists, reprints, and meta shifts with new sets. So right off the bat, it just feels like a bad investment of both your money and time. However, with Edison format, none of these issues really exist. Edison format is the short era of Yu-Gi-Oh! That existed in 2010, right before the release of Star Strike Blast. And it gets its name from SJC Edison, a big tournament that happened that year. What sets this format apart from other retro formats is a couple key things. 1. It's surprisingly balanced. 2. It's relatively simple. 3. It's decently affordable. And 4. It has so much room for creativity. Let me explain. This format somehow, whether intentional by Konami's part or just by pure luck, is one of the most balanced formats of all time. What I mean by this is that it doesn't feel like there's one particular deck that is tier 0, or just extremely dominant. There aren't a bunch of broken cards that can just outright win you the game. Don't get me wrong, there are like some, and we'll get to them. And there's a strong pool of diversity that keeps the game pretty fresh. You won't be battling the same deck over and over again. And new decks or new tech cards seem to be popping up every couple of months. Going first is always strong since you do get to draw a card, but it doesn't guarantee you a win. And since most hand traps don't exist by this point, there is less fear of your plays being stopped against an open board. What's also surprising is the ban list works really well. The cards that are banned, limited, and semi-limited kind of make sense and are the key to helping keep this format balanced. But we can't talk about the format without talking about the decks. Remember, this is in 2010, so some beloved archetypes and cards just don't exist yet. Hanzo! But there's still so much variety. Some of the strongest and most popular decks include Vayu Turbo, Blackwings, Heroes, Frogs, Zombies, Fairies, Dragons, Lightsworn, Machina, and Quick Draw. And each of these decks have variations that straight up change the way the decks play, as well as variations that combine multiple strategies together. So really, there are many more decks that I didn't even mention yet that just exist in between here, including some rogue decks that can easily win tournaments as well. And while that may seem overwhelming, I promise that this format is honestly... By this point in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, there aren't any Link monsters, XYZs, or pendulums. All there is synchros and fusion monsters. Every card essentially does what it says, and if there's ever a question involving a specific ruling, the good people over at EDISONFormat.com, yes, there's a website, they have you covered with detailed rulings on almost every card. But some fundamentally important rules exist here and there that you need to understand before jumping into this format. For starters, all of the effects are pre-errata, meaning that some cards like YUGIOH Guardian are actually very strong because it doesn't require an Earth tuner to function. Just any generic tuner will suffice. This also means cards like Future Fusion are very strong because they can send all of the monsters to the grave upon activation. So make sure that if you're buying cards in real life, you know what the card originally said during this format, as it does drastically change how the card functions. One other very important rule that is in this format is priority. Priority allows for the turn player to activate effects of monsters first, the moment that they're summoned. For example, let's take a card like Judgment Dragon. In modern Yu-Gi-Oh, if you summon this card, and I activate a card like Bottomless Trap Hole, this card would be banished without ever having a chance to activate its effect. So now you lost your Judgment Dragon, and your opponent gets to keep the rest of their field. However, in Edison, if you summon Judgment Dragon, you can use its effect immediately to blow up the entire field, and then your opponent can activate Bottomless Trap Hole. So while, yes, you still lose your Judgment Dragon, your opponent also loses their field. This makes cards like Judgment Dragon, Dark Arm Dragon, Chaos Sorcerer, and countless other bottom boss monsters even stronger than they already are. So once you understand priority, the rest of the gameplay is very straightforward, and you'll easily learn how to pilot any deck with ease. There also exist very important power cards in this format that everybody mentally plays around, like Gores, Mirror Force, Torrential Tribute, and Heavy Storm. So knowing that these cards exist may make you think twice before attacking, summoning, or setting too much back row. So knowing what cards exist and are limited or semi-limited will make you a better duelist for this format. And if you think that sounds complicated, remember the card pool is significantly smaller than modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's also never gonna change. Unless you're someone who needs some cards to be max rarity, which I understand, shiny is better, most of the top decks can be made for under 60 bucks. In modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, one important card for a deck can be $60, and usually you need 3 of those cards. Just do some simple math, it's a lot cheaper. So what most players, like me, end up doing is having the ability to build multiple decks without breaking the bank. But even if you want to go all out and buy high rarity versions of your deck, it won't be a waste because the cards aren't going anywhere. And you don't have to worry about your deck being banned or being power crept, because this format is static and unchanging. However, one unfortunate side effect of this format is that any card that lacks reprints or common versions, these cards have skyrocketed to pretty high prices, like Substitute for Frogs and Absolute Zero for hero decks. But over time, Konami has already made a ton of reprints of once expensive Edison staples, like Revived King Hades, Blackwing Armor Master, and Totem Dragon. So I do think Konami does sort of care about the Edison player base. So please, Substitute, just reprint it. Oh my god, please, Konami. The part that has me the most excited about Edison format is the creativity that is constantly coming out of this format. People have already dug deep into the card pool and have uncovered strategies that never existed before in Yu-Gi-Oh! When the format first became popularized, people assumed that the deck that won SJC Edison was probably the best deck. But as players began deck building with a modern understanding of Yu-Gi-Oh!, new decks started forming immediately that quickly became the top of the meta, and that deck is more of a rogue deck now. In 2010, players barely used Vayu. And on paper, you may think it's not that good, you can't even use it for synchros. But in reality, it's one of the best cards in the format. And this card is the lifeblood of a deck that turbos out synchros with its effect. And this deck, called Vayu Turbo, has won so many big tournaments, online and offline. There's a deck that combines the power of Deep Sea Diva and the Hero Engine, and this has become Diva Hero or even a Diva Hero Beat engine that runs Alias and Gemini Spark. And this deck has never stopped seeing constant play. Players have straight up broke dragons with Trade-In, Cards of Consonance, and Super Rejuvenation, combined with the Blue Eyes package, and triple Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. Seriously, this is at 3. And these are more of the meta decks, but even rogue decks have gotten better and more creative. Players have discovered that Amaryllis, another card that also needs a reprint because it's a little too expensive, is actually kind of strong in this format with the power of plants. Neospacians, while they still suck, are used as a draw engine that fills your grave with whatever attribute or type you want, and duelists like Carpath have shown its power by topping tournaments with it. More recently, Gemini, yes, the crappy mechanic that everybody made fun of for being incredibly bad, has been seeing a lot more play due to the deck's interactions with the broken card Ultimate Offering. And only a month ago, players just discovered the synergy between Machina and Roids. Yes, those Roids, by using Express Roid to get free special summons of Machina Fortress. And as of recording this awesome Rock Stun Dark Gaia deck just topped, and it's using a card that no one's even heard of before called Release from Stone. And with so many archetypes and cards, it will only be a matter of time until somebody breaks Relinquished, Six Samurai, Kawaki Meru, or even a deck that I don't even know exists yet, but everybody still hates Glad Beast, so don't play that deck. It's so exciting, and it's the most fun I've ever had deck building in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. While I personally never topped with this deck, I will take credit for showcasing the synergy of Mystic Tomato, Mark of the Rose, and Power Tool Dragon when I was featured on E3 Yu-Gi-Oh's channel, a channel completely dedicated to Edison format. You should check him out after this video. And after being showcased, it inspired some people to take the idea, tweak it, and actually win tournaments with it. That whole scenario was amazing to see happen in real time. So Edison format is just a really fun way for me to play a game that I enjoy without worrying about all the main issues that plague modern Yu-Gi-Oh! However, it's not perfect. Cards like Royal Oppression just counter so many fun strategies and single-handedly can win games by itself, and the existence of Trap Dust Shoot is just actually boring to deal with. Also, Brain Control. It can just randomly win you games that otherwise wouldn't be winnable. But most other annoying floodgates and frustrating one-ofs can be played around or outed a bit easier. So you really do just get used to a lot of the problem cards of the format. But if Edison isn't your cup of tea, there are other popular retro formats, and new ones that have just started gaining more popularity. So let me quickly talk about a few. Go format is one of the most popular older formats, and while it's pretty fun with how back and forth the gameplay can be, I personally am not a fan of some of the more blatantly unbalanced cards in the format, a la Pot of Greed, Graceful Charity, Delinquent Duo, and BLS. But if you want something even more retro than Edison, and also a lot slower, this format can be for you. This format is surprisingly very similar to Edison, but with some huge power cards introduced like Solemn Warning, Trishula, and strong archetypes that make it a faster and more powerful format. I personally don't think it's as balanced as Edison and can be even more frustrating due to the introduction of hand traps like Max C and Valor, but it's slowly growing on me and may eventually start rivaling Edison in popularity. I'm personally nostalgic for this format as it's one that I actually played in when it was happening in real time. It's a bit trap heavy though, which is neither here nor there. Some people like it, some people don't. Pair that with some hilariously dumb cards not being banned like Soul Charge, Infernity at almost full power, and artifacts just being a thing, and you have a recipe for a fun XYZ oriented format. I think anyone who loved Yu-Gi-Oh at one point but quit should give one of these retro formats, but especially Edison format, a try. The charm of Yu-Gi-Oh is still there, with no Konami there to ban all your favorite cards and power creep the others. While nobody really loves Dueling Book, I'm glad it exists as it's a fun way to play retro formats online. And now they finally added an Edison ranked ladder, so it's a pretty good time to get into this format and really practice your favorite decks. There's also amazing Edison content creators that you can watch if you want to understand the game better, or if you want help building rogue strategies, or fun jank builds, or if you want to just watch cool replays and gameplay. The Edison community, while niche, is very strong. There's even cool discords that you can join to discuss different decks, and even compete in small tournaments online. And after you've gotten enough practice online, you're ready to play in person. You can find a local, meet cool people, make friends, and enjoy that classic Yu-Gi-Oh experience that I personally sorely missed. So that's why I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh again. And it's the most fun I've had in Yu-Gi-Oh in a long time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.